So, thank you for joining us. This week I've got a special interview with Dec Roberts, Wigan Warriors and England wheelchair player.
Hi,
Played in the
I'm
World
Tom.
Cup
I'm
just
Matty.
6
And I'm
months
Lewis.
ago.
This is the
And
Wigan
he's
Way,
currently
Wigan's
playing a major
favourite
part
rugby league
in
podcast.
Wigan Warriors wheelchair team. So, Declan, thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, mate. Appreciate it.
Let's get right into it. So, you've been involved in rugby for as long as I've known you, but how did you get into rugby league in general?
Rugby league in general, going back a long time ago, I went to my first game of Wigan Rugby League in a car seat, 2 months old, at Central Park.
Got a very similar story.
Yeah, I've been pretty much involved since then. I started playing just after I turned 5. Wasn't really old enough to play. I played for 2 or 3 years at St Jude's when I started. Moved to Chevy because then I only had to play it 1 year.
Yeah.
Moved to Leyland because I could play at my own age and it was pretty close to where I was living at the time. And then just stuck it out, and that was sort of my running rugby journey. Played there till I was my early 20s. Played running rugby for probably about 15, 16 years.
So you played running rugby up until about being about 20?
Yeah, probably about 20, 21 was when I started getting a bit more.
So that was a bigger overlap into, we just talked beforehand about when you started playing wheelchair rugby. That's a bigger overlap than what I thought it was. So do you want to tell us about your wheelchair time? How did you get into that?
Yeah, so that was, like you said, a pretty big overlap. So I started playing wheelchair rugby league in 2013, I believe.
10 years ago?
Yeah. So probably a little bit before, ironically, the World Cup then. Got into it through my dad. He always coached me at running rugby, and obviously a lot of people, when they get to open age, the dad will come out of retirement or they'll still play in open age and they'll play a game together. And that was something we could obviously never do with my dad being disabled.
Yeah.
So wheelchair rugby league was a way for me to enjoy rugby differently. I've always loved rugby league. Something new, something different, a way to keep fit, and most importantly, a way to be able to sort of have that playing relationship with my dad as well as the coaching relationship we already had.
See, I think that's massive, isn't it? I'm not played rugby anywhere near as much as you have, but getting to play a game with your dad in any sport, it's a bit of a moment, and you get to take the picture together. And obviously, with your dad's disability, you wouldn't have got that chance in running rugby. So, going into the wheelchair game, do you remember your first game playing with your dad?
Oh, now you're asking. So my first game playing with my dad actually wasn't in my first season. So when at the time we were playing for Bury Jigsaw.
Yep.
And I was playing, because obviously I was brand new more or less, I was playing for the second team.
Yep.
Who were playing in the championship, and he was playing in the first team and playing for player coach at England at the time.
Yeah.
So I think my first game with my dad actually came the year after, in 2014.
Yeah.
Which was when we moved to Leyland.
Right, okay.
So I don't really remember all that much about it, to be honest. I just remember it was a long time ago.
Long time ago. So a lot of games there in that time that you got the opportunity to play with your dad. Is there any highlights of playing with your dad that really stand out for you? Now, I put you on the spot there a little bit, but is there a moment where you remember thinking, I'm glad I got to touch the field with my dad today?
I think the two that really stand out was in 2015 we went to play against Catalan in France as part of a double header.
Oh, right, okay.
For what we were calling the European Cup. So they were the champions of France, we were the champions of England at the time. So they came to play us, and then we went to play them. Playing the first game at home with him was pretty special, but playing that game away in front of, at the time, what was a massive crowd, probably not far off 1,000 people.
Wow.
Which at the time was ridiculous. That was massive.
Crowd.
It was comfortably the biggest crowd I'd ever played in front of then, and
Yeah.
that was a pretty special moment. And then, ironically, the next one's probably not playing with him, but playing against him at the World Cup, where he played for Ireland.
That must have been a weird feeling.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think a much bigger deal of it was made than sort of in our heads at the time, because for us, we were fully into camp at that point.
Yeah.
The next game, this is the team.
I was going to say, it was like game 3 or 4, wasn't it, of the World Cup? It wasn't like your first match. You'd already played 2 or 3 beforehand.
Yeah, it was our last group game, so it was our third game before we moved up for the semis in Sheffield. And it wasn't something I massively thought about before it or during. It was sort of afterwards what had happened and being able to take that in. And I think that was in front of about 3,000 people, so a little bit more than we had for the other memory. But yeah, I think that's probably my favourite, because it was the first time I played against him as well, ever. So that was pretty crazy as well.
Probably the only time, isn't it?
Yeah, the only time to date, yeah.
Now, during that game, was there any little bits going on between you, giving it to each other a little bit, trying to get the upper hand at all between you both?
Not particularly, and I think, and in his words, it wasn't a particularly competitive, close game.
Yeah.
Which, like I said, was his words.
Yeah.
It was more about trying to develop them and us working on our plays. So it wasn't something that we were massively thought about. I know
They're still a developing nation in the wheelchair game, aren't they?
yeah, massively so, and they're making some pretty impressive strides actually at the moment. They've just drawn with Wales in the Celtic Cup.
I was going to say, I've just seen that they've had the Celtic Cup and they played 3 games back to back, didn't they?
So Ireland, Scotland was the first game, then it was Ireland, Wales, and Wales, Scotland, and Wales won it again. I think the 7th year in a row or something that they've won it. But it was the first time it had been really competitive.
Yeah, and
sort of for that winning spot, and
again seeing things. It's the first time I've heard of it. So the fact that it was quite competitive and there was no nils. That both teams were getting losing teams were getting 20, 30 points. I thought that's a really good sign that both teams are in this competition. Really.
No, exactly, and it's nice to see the nations being able to develop like Ireland, like Scotland, like the USA in the World Cup last year, and Australia less so, but also equally because they're sort of not moving up as much, but they've still moved from 4th to 3rd in the world rankings. They look like much tougher competition as of the World Cup last year. So it's just nice to see the game being able to develop globally more than anything, and I think that's sort of what the point of the World Cup was.
Well, we just talked about off air about how Australia are developing and the game in Australia is developing. Can you see a world where that develops for the other Southern Hemisphere nations, potentially New Zealand, maybe a PNG, a Samoa? Hopefully, as an outsider looking in, an ideal world where there's 20 teams competing is not only a real possibility, but would be an absolutely brilliant place for the game to be.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. As you mentioned, we just had a quick chat off air about it, and it's sort of an accessibility thing, being able to get hold of the chairs because they're still quite expensive. Yeah. Even a second-hand one was setting you back a couple of grand. But I certainly believe that's a place we could end up as a sport, and I certainly hope we've managed to make it there. And being able to have a World Cup with as many teams as the men's and the women's, I think would be pretty crazy looking back on where we've been and where we are now.
Yeah, I
think certainly manageable.
That we're going to talk about the World Cup very shortly. Seeing the development literally over a 4 or 5 week period, I can't believe how much the game grew from you seeing a score every so often to people I know that have never watched a game of running rugby league telling me how good is this game. I said to you, I missed the first game because I was out at the time, and I got home and a friend of mine from university rang me and said, how good's this wheelchair rugby? And I said, I don't know what you're on about, I've missed the game. So I had to wait for the next game to watch, and I was watching it going, wow, this is brilliant. It's amazing, and the amount of people that were watching it that I know that weren't involved in rugby league at all. It's one thing getting rugby league fans to watch wheelchair rugby league, but getting fans who don't care about the running game in and entertained, I think that is a massive step.
Yeah, that's ironically kind of what we were hoping for, because it's rugby league and rugby league fans are keen and they're really enjoying it, but the other demographic is people who have nothing to do with rugby league, and it's because it's so similar but so different. Like, people who know both games can see the similarities, but if you didn't know either, you can very clearly see the differences as well. So they're the same but different sports, and I think they attract different people, which is why we managed to hit so many fans who weren't quote unquote rugby league fans.
Yeah, that's it. It's about getting both audiences. The rugby league fans are obviously very, very passionate about the game, but at the same time, people that aren't involved in rugby league, or we talked about the other wheelchair sports like basketball, if they're getting in watching it, the amount of people watching it can only be a positive.
No, exactly, and that's kind of what we were hoping for from the World Cup, was to obviously to win, but more so to create a legacy for the sport and keep building it, which has shown so far this year in the numbers. We've had a lot more players competing. As we mentioned before we started recording, I think we've had 3 games at Wigan now where we've had around 150 people in, which for a domestic league crowd, I think our best last year was probably 60.
Yeah.
So you can see the massive growth already, and just kind of keep pushing from that and keep working on it. Hopefully get a few more games on telly here and there.
Yeah. There's been a few on. Is it the Sportsman?
Yeah,
There's
the
been a few
Sportsmen have been great, actually. They've come down and put quite a few on so far.
And I think that's absolutely brilliant again. I know I've struggled to get to any games this year, but being able to watch on the Sportsman when I've been doing other things, but you've been able to get it on and watch, it's brilliant. Now, I really want to dive into the World Cup. So, can we start at the beginning? How did you find out you were in the England squad?
So, it's actually a bit of a funny story. So, I was actually on holiday at the time.
All right, okay.
So, I was in Gran Canaria with my girlfriend, and we just sat around the pool, not doing much. And I get a message from Tom, the England coach, saying, please make yourself available tomorrow for a Teams call between whatever times they were. And I was like, okay, well, this is either going to go really well or the holiday is going to have a bit of a dampener put on it.
So it was that out of the blue. It was literally, tomorrow get on this Teams call.
I knew it was coming, I just wasn't 100% sure when.
Yeah.
And then it was like, this is when we need you, be available. So we were sat in the room for probably about 4 hours, just
waiting
around, because obviously I knew what time it was going to be. I wasn't sat waiting, being made to wait. I was just sat there because I was so nervous I couldn't focus on anything else.
Yeah, you can't go and sit around the pool when you might get an England call up in an hour.
No, exactly, and it's one of those where it's a lot of people are saying like, oh, it's this many years hard work or whatever. I mean, I got the original call up into the training squad in March 2020.
Yeah.
Obviously that went well.
Yeah.
We did a lot of training sessions in our bedrooms after that on Teams and stuff.
Because obviously, because COVID came in then and delayed the World Cup like it did with the running game. But for a sport that at the time was relatively unheard of, it could have had a massive derailment. And again, I think that adds to the success of the World Cup, that it's got through that. It's got through the difficulties that it had, and then been able to shine so well is really good.
No, exactly, and I think that the reason I brought it up is because, to be honest, the year before I don't think I'd have been selected.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that's a secret either. I wasn't quite ready yet, so that extra year gave me that time to develop a little bit more and play sort of to that style, because obviously it's a lot of people I'd never played with before who'd been together as a group for since way before I'd come in. Because I mean, I made my England debut in 2014 and then didn't really play for England after that until the World Cup, the mid-season or the internationals, when the World Cup should have been originally.
Yeah.
So it was just trying to sort of adjust to a new group, play the way they play, sort of get into that mindset. And I think it was a lot of hard work, but you could put it down to sort of the 10 years I've been playing, or 9 at the time, and getting that call was pretty mad. And I was just sat on the bed, and my girlfriend had gone, right, I'll leave you to it, I'll go on the balcony, you stay in, you just do your call and see how you get on. And they rang me and told me, and we had a bit of a chat about it.
Was it a one-on-one phone call, or was it all the guys who'd been selected?
No, so it was all, it was one-on-one to a degree, so it was myself, Tom, coach, Martin, the general manager, and just sort of said, look, this is the logistics of it.
Yeah.
This is the decision. This is what you've been selected for. This is why. This is everything you've done. And I think they thought I'd frozen, because I just kind of sat there like, I've actually, like, I've done it. Like, I've grafted.
Achieved your goals.
I've proper grafted and managed to actually do it. And then I don't know, I went a little bit numb for a minute, and then it just kind of hit me all at once, and I was like, I just got really hyper, and then obviously went and had a sensible drink by the pool and nothing silly.
Yeah, obviously.
Preparing for a World Cup.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, like, even on holiday, I was in the gym whilst my girlfriend's chilling around the pool. I'm going to the gym, I'm keeping prepared, keeping on top of it, doing what I can. So
I suppose once you get that phone call, it's all systems go then.
Yeah, exactly. So
the countdown begins.
The hard work paid off, and it was a pretty surreal moment, but definitely one of the best of my life, yeah.
So then, obviously, you just mentioned about the phone call. I've always wondered, as a person that's never competed in a team sport to that level where you would get an England call up, how that phone call went. You obviously mentioned then that this is what you've been selected for. This is the role we want you to play.
Yeah.
They'd already. It's interesting to see that they'd already made the plan beforehand that we want you for this type of role. And I'm not going to ask you to go into details because obviously that's between you and the team.
Yeah.
But to understand that they're ringing you saying we want you to do this, be ready.
Yeah, and it was actually pretty helpful because obviously we'd been going over the game plan for years at this point. We sort of knew what we were looking to do and how we were looking to do it, but just being told that, look, this is exactly what you've been selected for. This is everything you're good at. Just keep doing that.
It really gets you to simplify your game and not...
Yeah, and it was very reassuring that, I'm good enough, I've earned this, let's go. And it sort of picked me up and kept me going. And
I think a bit of that as well of this guy wants me because I can do this.
No, exactly.
I have this value. Rather than going into your first meeting together as a team and going, oh, he's played for England 10 times, he's done this and I need to try and do that. Being told beforehand what you've done and why you're in the team, that's so reassuring that you can just go and play your own game.
No, exactly. It makes a huge difference. And it was, like I said, it was one of those where we kind of knew what the plan was already, but just being reassured of that, being told, this is why you are good enough, let's go, just straight in then pretty much, and all systems go for the World Cup.
So then let's jump into the World Cup. Obviously there was 3 group games, semi-final, final.
Yeah.
You were involved there at every game. As far as I'm aware, there was no one that missed out on being involved in the game, whether you were on the bench or in the starting squad. There wasn't anyone.
So we took 11, so there was one person who had to miss out every game.
Right, okay.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think someone missed one because they were ill, or because obviously that's one of the things you're going to think of, especially while COVID was still going on. Is got to take extras in case someone gets ill or someone gets concussed or...
And there's the risk of someone getting COVID. That's the 7-day protocol, and they've got to get negative tests. And I'm assuming the World Cup had all these rules in.
Oh yeah, massively so.
That you then actually have to take an extra person or an extra 2 people to just be safe, really.
Yeah, well, I think most teams took 12. We took 11.
Obviously, being the home nation, you don't have to,
because we've got people who are still there. So I think, there was all sort of little things like that you'd. Obviously, you think of in a squad, but especially in that sort of COVID, end of COVID kind of period where all the new variants were coming out and there's just something else to add on top and think of. So it was...
a little bit of nerves around that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But it was, like I said, 10 on a game day squad and then you had one who missed out on the game day squad every time. But it was things like, for the first, like, you arrive in camp, COVID test.
Yeah.
You've been out for the day, whatever... COVID test. It's still that sort of thing because obviously if one person gets it who's sharing a room with someone, that's 2 people gone already and you're down to 9 when a game day squad's 10.
Yeah, and that causes you an issue. And I take it that's why the nations coming over like Australia will have brought 12 because
exactly.
They're rooming in 2 and it wipe out a room but you'd still have 10 available.
No, exactly, and that was sort of the point, and that was one of the benefits of us having 11 is that we had a room for one person if they got ill.
Yeah,
you're on your own, you're isolated. So it was all little things that were thought of like that, and like you said, it's just sort of that sort of time period where it's very, how are we gonna be okay? Are we gonna get through this all right? It was pretty nerve-wracking. So yeah, I think that was the main reason why we ended up taking more than 10.
So then, let's jump into the group stage games, should I say, rather than the knockouts. We'll start off with where it started with the group stage. In them, there was 3 games. Any standout moments in them 3 games for yourself or for the team as a whole? Was there a moment where you thought this side could win it?
Well, I think we kind of felt like that coming in. We were pretty confident in ourselves coming in, and our plan was always sort of one eye very much on the team we're playing, but then sort of in the back of the mind, these are the kind of things we want to do to prepare to play against France, because that's what we were expecting, and that's... If everything went to plan... You 2 are ranked
number 1 and 2, aren't you?
Yeah, at the time they were 1 and we were 2.
Yeah.
So that was very much sort of like when we played against Australia, we're thinking, right, we need to beat Australia, we know they're a good side, but these are the kind of things we want to work on because we know this will work against France. And just little things like that. I think the standout moment for the team in the group stage was probably going out to that first game.
Yeah.
It was the first time anyone had played in front of that big of a crowd. Obviously, it was a world record at the time for our sport, which was pretty crazy. And I think the one for me was probably... So I didn't get on court in the first game, which, again, I already knew about, as we mentioned before, so no issues there. But in the second game, when I made my sort of World Cup debut, as it were, I think I scored a try on my first touch and ended up scoring a hat-trick pretty quickly. So that was probably my personal standout from that. Obviously, having already mentioned the Ireland game, so I'll bring that back up.
Well, there's not many people that can say they've got a World Cup hat-trick in the chosen sport, really.
No, it's not a bad record to hold, no.
No, and trying your first moment, what a way to get the nerves gone and right into the game.
No, exactly, just stuck straight in against Spain, who we knew were going to be a tough opposition. Obviously, we mentioned before, obviously the score ended up looking like a bit of a blowout, but sort of in wheelchair rugby, you kind of divide everything by 3.
Yeah.
So the players are almost a third, length, width, almost a third. So we kind
even
of
the posts are like a third smaller, and
the posts are smaller. The speed is sort of a third faster.
Yeah.
Like a set of 6 you're doing in 20 seconds as opposed to a minute. So you sort of divide it by 3. So we knew it was going to be a tough game, and we were ready for that, thankfully, and just managed to take over there. And then it left us in a pretty good position, knowing we were guaranteed group stages, rather the semi-finals before playing Ireland.
But with that, I just want to go back onto that with that about everything being a third small. You mentioned before, like games that finish 90 points to 60, they can look like a bit of a blowout. But if you were to scale that to the running game, everything by a third, it's probably like 30 points to 20.
Yeah, that's sort of how we look at it as players.
I think that's quite an insightful point for fans that are getting into the game to understand that there will be more points.
Yeah.
It's like if you made the goals bigger in football, they'll score more goals.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, 90 points to a rugby league fan who's watching it for the first time, you're thinking, whoa, they got smashed. But actually, that's 30 points in our brains. That's how we think of it. So that's sort of the way we would equate it for a non-wheelchair rugby league fan who's familiar with rugby league.
In the same way, that also brings the game into... You always think in rugby league, if you've got a 12-point lead, you kick a penalty to go to 14, they need 3 tries. In reality, 3 tries in wheelchair rugby league can happen very quickly. We talk about the speed of the sets. You can go bang, bang, bang and get 3 tries in the space of 2-3 minutes. And that points decimated. That security net would be 20-30 points in wheelchair rugby league.
The game management is similar but different. Because as you'll have seen, when we played Halifax at the start of the year, that was, 13 points decided it, something like that. Yeah. So it's still sort of the same thing, like it's still 3 scores and maintaining it the same. It just tends to be that there are more tries scored.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's so much faster and smaller. It's just kind of how it goes, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so entertaining, so can't complain about that.
Not at all. So then, let's go to the knockouts. You obviously win the semi-final. The moment you won it, how did you guys feel as a team? You've booked your place in the World Cup final.
Yeah, I think, again, as we mentioned in the group stages, and that was sort of what we were hoping for and planning for and optimistically ready for the whole time.
But I guess there must have been a bit of relief there that actually now we've planned to get to a World Cup final, we've planned to play France, we've done that bit, let's do part 2.
No, exactly, and it was that sort of thing of going, and like I said to you before, it's not to diminish our opposition, that was the standards we held ourselves to, and I think that's why we sort of went full throttle in every game and made sure we were prepared and ready and kept ourselves going. And obviously it was it ended up being quite a big score again, the semi-final, but it's one of those where you keep going till the end, final whistle goes, you're like, right, we're in a World Cup final, bloody hell, how did that happen? And then start prepping for that straight away, pretty much. Like, there wasn't much time to be overjoyous and celebrate. We got pretty much straight back onto the prep for the final,
See, that's the thing that I always wonder about, not being a professional sportsman, not playing in them big moments, that you got the relief of getting to a World Cup final, you probably want to go out and celebrate. Tough you can't, because you've got the big thing to do now.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that sort of made our squad so tight-knit and so close, is that we were all of the same mindset of, right, that's done, onto the final. we'll celebrate and we'll do whatever afterwards. For now, we're straight on to the final. Get prepared, get ready to go.
Yeah. So you were fully prepared for the final. Let's dive into it. You go out into the World Cup final. What was going through your head as you go onto the court?
I was, to be honest with you, a lot of people deal with it in a lot of different ways. I know a lot of people were very keep their eyes closed, head down,
Yeah.
ignore it. But I enjoy using the crowd to build off, and it's nice to have that experience and playing in front of, what was it, like 4,500 or something like that.
That's a massive crowd.
Oh, it's a huge record. Well, it was comfortably the world record, and we've already broken it 3 times. So just sort of taking it all in, have a look round, see if there's anyone I know, just soak up the atmosphere, soak up the noise, use it all, and just enjoy it, make the most of it. How many times are you going to be sat in front of a home crowd at a World Cup final? So just enjoy it. That's sort of what I took from the whole experience, just make the most of it.
I think that's massive that all of you deal with it in your own different ways, and you sort of don't know what you're going to be like till you get there. There's players who are, I'm guessing, have been in the changing rooms with their headphones on in their own little bubble, little windows that would have been trying to get the energy, the noise from the ground, from the stadium, and you just got to experience it your own way.
Exactly, it's just sort of doing everything, like you said, in your own way. So there was people sat there absolutely blasting heavy metal and EDM and drinking energy drinks. Whereas I like to be a bit more chilled. I was sat listening to some country music. I was one headphone on, one headphone off, just watching people, just relaxed.
Go on, I've got to ask, what song did you listen to before you went out? Can you remember?
I think the last song I probably listened to was Beer Never Broke My Heart by Luke Combs.
Get it on your playlist, guys.
That was probably the last song I listened to. It normally is before I go out.
See, that's what our World Cup winner listens to, so you've got to get it in your playlist now. But do you want to talk us through your games, the mixed emotions? I don't want you to talk about the ref because I'm going to ask you about that later on.
We'll come to that later.
But the game, how did you feel during the game? Obviously, you were on the bench. You had your roles prepped and ready. What was the emotions like?
Yeah, again, like we mentioned before, it was very much we had a plan. We knew what the plan was and we knew how to execute it. So it was just sort of making sure I was ready if I needed to go on.
Yep.
Making sure I was sort of keeping everybody else ready, because obviously the nerves are getting to people, and the more you sat there and not doing anything, you get a little bit agitated, and just trying to keep everyone calm. Obviously it's a high pressure environment. If anybody needed warming up, I'd just go and chuck a ball around with them, give them a bit of a push in that, just sort of do what I could for the squad, do what I could for the team, make sure everybody's as calm as possible, ready to go, and just sort of make sure we can do everything we can to win.
So it was a brilliant game, absolutely unbelievable. The standard that you were playing at, probably the best wheelchair match that I've ever seen. At the time, did you know you were playing such a high standard game and it was so good and that people were obsessed with it?
We'd had one eye on the social media sort of all the way through and seeing how people were getting enthralled with it and how people were getting into it, but it was something we weren't trying to focus on too much.
Yeah.
As obviously an external distraction, like there was a time and a place for it.
Yeah.
Like in your downtime, you discuss your social media, how many followers you've got, whatever.
That must have been different, that, from playing a little bit of wheelchair rugby league in a relatively small environment to being on the BBC. I can imagine your Twitter followers went through the roof, doing interviews and people are commenting on your interviews. Obviously, we talked about playing against your dad, but there was a massive response to that. You did an interview together, didn't you, where you talked about it after. That must be, for a lad from Wigan who's been thrown onto this world stage, that must have been completely different.
Yeah, if I'm being 100% honest with you, that wasn't one of my focuses. That wasn't something I was overly bothered about. A lot of people were talking about it, and I mean, that's each to their own, whatever floats your boat, but that wasn't what I was massively bothered about. What I was more enthralled about and happy to see was the positive response to our sport more than anything, rather than us as people, just the game as a whole, and watching people tweet about it. And I think, I'm not sure how high up it, I'm sure someone said it was number one trending after the final.
Yeah, it was after the final.
That was something for me that I was more bothered about, and seeing how many people
Whereas they're tweeting about the game.
We're getting involved and tweeting about it and getting stuck in and enjoying it and learning about it. That was sort of what I was more happy to see on the social media side of things, yeah.
So we talked about the game, and it was 24-24.
I believe so, yeah.
Going into the last 3 or 4 minutes.
About 3 minutes.
England score. What went through your head?
A lot. You can see on the camera angle of him scoring when it pans out, you can see us on the bench literally jumping up and down in our chairs.
Yeah.
I sort of, it was more of not necessarily trying to shout on because you don't want to distract people, but also you can see differently to them and you can see what's happening. So Rob takes that carry down the left. We can see the cover defence going, like, go inside, you're going to go in touch. And then he does, and then obviously we score on the next play. And that was sort of when he goes over and scores. It's hard to describe. There wasn't really anything in my head.
Yeah.
I was just sort of shouting and cheering and jumping
Pure
up and
relief.
down. Yeah. Relief, elation. Then it sort of all sank in afterwards. So I think, there wasn't any thought, really, just noise.
So that wasn't the end of the game.
Well, no, there was still a bit of
Still
time.
about 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
How quickly did you guys, as the bench and the team, the coaching staff, bring yourself back down to this moment of, it's not game over yet, we've got a job to do?
I think for me personally, pretty quick. Because he goes over, he scores, you celebrate, and then you're like, right, he's got to kick the conversion. Everyone shut up.
Yeah.
Because we need him to kick the conversion. Which unfortunately ended up missing, so then we're like, oh, hang on. There's still a lot of game left to play here in this 90 seconds or whatever it was.
Because they score. If France score, they've got a kick to win it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just sort of shouting on sort of composure, stay calm, 5 drives and a kick, nothing daft, and just sort of trying to
Manage the game.
Yeah, manage the game out till the hooter. And I think, obviously, we did a pretty good job of that because it ended up working. But for me personally, that was sort of, I switched pretty quickly. It was like, right, calm down.
Yeah.
Not won anything yet. Sort it out. And I think the coaching staff and a lot of the players were very similar. And we were like, right, it's not done.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we
Get
don't
back on
switch
it.
off here. Yeah, exactly. So I think it was pretty quick. We managed to switch back on.
What was your feeling the moment that final whistle went?
I think there was so much because obviously every person growing up in any sport ever wants to play and win at the highest level, and that's
Your entire goal is to do that.
yeah, exactly. And sort of in the last 10 seconds where you're taking them carries where you're injured or a bit slow, or I've got a bit of cramp, whatever. That's sort of setting in. So when the hooter goes, it's just like, whoa, I've sort of done it. I've achieved one of my lifelong dreams.
Yeah.
And as you'll have seen, and I'm not afraid to say it, there was a lot of us crying.
Yeah, no.
Because it's sort of, we've worked so hard for this over our lives to get to this point, and it's just being able to do it in front of friends, family, 4,500 people, I think just over 1 million on the 1.2 on the telly or something. So being able to do it in front of all those people is pretty mental.
Because I think, again, that's the massive thing to remember. This wasn't just a year of planning. This is 4 or 5 years of a team planning it, and 15 years of your life, 10 years of your life playing to get to the highest level, to have the chance to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You get to pick up the trophy. You guys, I can't imagine, I don't know whether you'd be able to explain the feelings that we're going through when you get to pick up that trophy and you get to sit with it on your lap. Just the best feeling ever.
Yeah, there was, like you said, there isn't really any way to explain the feeling. I think pride was a big one.
Yeah.
Relief, like you said before, like we've worked so hard for this and we've done it.
Yeah.
There isn't really any way to describe it when they're walking over with the trophy and you're all sat there. Yeah, it was...
watching it come towards you, waiting.
You're just like, right, come on, let's go. Come on, bring it over. We want it.
Why are you walking so slow? Hurry up.
There isn't really any way to describe it, but as I mentioned about the selection, certainly up there, undoubtedly one of the best moments of my life.
Now, I take it you celebrated with just a quiet one, nothing too silly.
Oh, of course, nothing. You know, athletes,
Professional athletes.
quote unquote athletes, as it were. So, Yeah, I mean, we're people. Everyone knows you people. I think we went back to the hotel. They'd left the bar open extra long for us so we could have a few beers and that.
Obviously.
Because we had a few beers there, had a bit of food.
Yeah.
Obviously saw all of our family and friends who'd come to watch. Went back, had a bit more of a celebration, saw some people. Just to be honest, for me personally anyway, it was actually a pretty quiet one. It was late, but it was pretty quiet because it was more talking to people coming up, chatting to you, asking about how it was, and I spent a lot more time talking than drinking, and then obviously we had to back it up the next day as well because we're straight to Old Trafford for the men's and women's finals, so it was one of those where I don't want to be proper rough for that. I'd rather enjoy it.
You want to enjoy the experience of getting to go out and show off that you've won the World Cup.
Yeah, like we knew we were in the VIP boxes or whatever they were, so it's like I don't want to be rough wearing a 3-piece suit for one.
Yeah.
That's never fun. But I want to be able to enjoy.
When did you find that out? Did you know you were going to be there whether win, lose or draw? Or...
So I might be wrong, but I think it was both finalists.
Right.
But it might have just... I think we were going anyway, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we were going anyway.
Yeah.
And I think both finalists were... I might be wrong. Like I said, I wasn't focused on organisation. None of us were. We were focused on playing. So I think that was the important thing for us. And yeah, we just got to all out. Be on the couch, in your suits.
Be ready.
Yeah, we're going to Old Trafford. So that was that was really surreal. That was mental. Like being sat in the boxes and stuff was mad, but walking out onto Old Trafford. Walking down that tunnel, no matter what sport you watch, everyone knows Old Trafford. Walking through that tunnel onto that pitch was...
With the trophy.
Oh, it was crazy. I've been there God knows how many times watching grand finals and whatnot, so being able to actually do that was like, whoa.
And I guess that actually having people speak to you who you've probably looked up to, coming asking you about how does it feel to be a World Cup winner.
Yeah, it was that was probably the craziest part. So before the final, we went to there was a little media thing, and we were doing a few interviews and a few little chats and whatnot, and I stood there, and I'll remember this till the very day I die. Stood there having a chat with a couple of the other wheelchair people. Yeah. So I was having a chat with one of the French blokes, I was having a chat with Tom, our coach, and then a few Aussie blokes walk up and like, "Hi, nice to meet you," and The one I remember more distinctly than anything, because of the way you said it, was Cameron Munster walks up and goes, "Hi, I'm Cam, nice to meet you." Wow. I'm like, yeah, I know who you are.
I watch you every week on the TV.
I literally see it every week. I know exactly who you are. But I think that sort of sums up rugby league in a nutshell, doesn't it? It's not like, you know who I am.
Yeah.
It's sort of the rugby league family, as everyone always says, and it was that sort of thing. And we got chatting to a few of the women's players, and we ended up getting a guard of honour from the Gillaroos walking out into Old Trafford because we met a few of them and spoke to them, and they was like, and it's just, honestly, I could never describe it. It was the craziest experience, being able to walk around what was actually still a pretty packed Old Trafford after the game as well. It was genuinely surreal.
Wow. So we'll take a quick break there. We'll come back after the break. We'll talk about life at the Warriors now, and the future of the wheelchair rugby league game.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So Declan, we're back. We just talked about the World Cup and the highs of that. Let's have a look at more like your day-to-day career, your Super League career. And where it's at now and then how it's been. So, first of all, have there been any highlights in your Wigan Warriors career so far that really stand out for you?
I mean, we the first time pulling on the cherry and white was pretty special, as I mentioned before. I've been a Wigan fan since literally birth. So being able to pull on the cherry and white and represent Wigan was incredibly special for me. And I think...
It's also a moment no one can ever take off you, that.
Well, no, exactly. That's something that I'll have forever. And I think this season, probably, ironically, we played a friendly against Leeds a couple of weeks ago, which we spoke about before, and it was Leeds' development team versus our championship team, and then the two first teams played each other. And
Yeah.
It was a big double header. It was all run by the club. It was pretty spectacular, to be honest. We had all sorts of lighting and seating and the inflatable tunnel from the fan village was there. And we came through that, and we had can't have been far off 200 fans. I think it was probably about 180,
which was massive for a friendly as well.
Yeah, for a friendly.
Not even a league game.
Yeah, which was that was incredible, being able to see how many players. I think we had not far off, probably about 15 for the day, probably a bit more. I think Leeds had for the day just over 20, and see that many players playing the game and that many people in to watch it, and the production value of it all.
Yeah.
For me, it showed what the game really can be.
Yeah.
If we manage to get sort of the right links with clubs and
keep developing.
Getting with more Super League clubs, develop the relationships there, and just keep on like that, really.
And that's, I suppose, the big thing that if you stop developing, the game stands still.
Yeah, exactly.
You've always got to keep improving, always got to keep trying to better yourselves, better the game, better yourself as a player, and better the game in general.
Yeah, so, that's not just at an elite level either. That's bringing up the newer players. That's improving everyone, and just keep it working, keep it moving, keep advertising it, keep getting it out there.
Like you said, we were just having a little chat in the break, in our little break. Then he was saying like your goals for the future of Wigan Warriors and the wheelchair team, and obviously there's the want to do well and win games, and
absolutely, yeah.
But in fact, like you say, what are your goals with Wigan Warriors?
I mean, the biggest goals are obviously win games, win trophies, represent Wigan the way Wigan should be represented. But I think certainly for the near future, the biggest thing for me is to just keep growing the number of players we've got, keep improving the players who we've got now, who are coming down, just keep bettering the standard of ourselves as a group and bettering the standard of the sport, and just represent Wigan with the community. Obviously being part of the community foundation, just sort of reach out, do everything the best we can, and hopefully build in a good environment and good players and a good squad. The wins will come off the back of that.
So how many players have you got involved now, roughly, at the club? Because you've got two teams. You've got one in the Championship, which is a development squad, I take it as, and you've got the first team in the top division. How many players have you got on board? How many are coming down and wanting to be involved?
I would say in total we've got over 20, probably 22, 23. Really, I'd say on a weekly basis at training, we're averaging, I'd say between 12 and 15 every week, which is
that's phenomenal.
Yeah,
that
for a five-a-side game, that's a lot of people. And I think that the biggest issue we have sometimes is chairs, as we mentioned very briefly earlier, the accessibility of the sport, because chairs are so expensive.
Yeah.
But it's great to see how many people we've got down, and having that many numbers and being able to see those players getting better. It's exactly, like I said, what we're hoping for. So
I was going to say, one of my standout memories from this season with the first team is when they had the almost the open day at the fan village pre-game, and they had the tag team playing, and they had the wheelchair team playing, and they had people trying out the wheelchairs, and see what it's like to be involved, because everyone thinks they could do it, but getting the chance to actually sit in one of the chairs and give it a go and figure out what you've got to do and the subtleties, it suddenly brings a bit of an eye opener really into the tactical difficulties of the game, because you sit here and you look at rugby league, I could have done that, but getting the chance to actually do it really does show how difficult it is, but it might just spark someone's interest in the game.
Yeah, so we you mentioned earlier actually, we did some taster sessions at the start of the year on the back of the World Cup. And I think we had about 30 people down.
Wow.
And one of those actually has continued playing for us and played pretty much every game all year for our championship squad. So he came straight out of that, trained that one time, came back down, and has progressed and is a regular starter in our championship squad now.
That is a real success story, because getting, even if it's just one person, like you say, has a bit of an interest after the World Cup, suddenly now playing every week, part of a team, part of a successful team that are doing quite well. There's been ups and downs, and what I keep hearing and what we've discussed before is that people are actually enjoying it, getting better, and that's all we can ask for, really.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's the hope. If you're not enjoying it, what's the point?
Yeah, you want lads that want to play. You want everyone involved to actually play the game and enjoy playing the game.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a hobby. I know obviously there was a lot of eyes on it over the World Cup, and it's a lot bigger than it was. But at the end of the day, it is still a hobby, and if you're not enjoying it, then so that's the big focus for us at the minute is just get everyone enjoying the rugby, make sure people are having fun with it, they're getting better, they're learning, but we're having a laugh, we're making new friends or improving friendships, and just taking it off there. And as you say, good squads produce good results, and that's kind of what we're hoping for. Just keep producing a good squad, good group of people, just keep building off it from there and see where we end up.
And it's good as an outsider to see how inclusive you guys are. All the guys getting involved. You're doing a lot of things right, and it's really, really impressive, I've got to say. So now let's have a look a little bit into the future. Where do you think this game could go? We had the success of the World Cup, and the running rugby league has took a lot of criticism of not going off the back of the success of the World Cup and not publicising the game, and what should I say? Not doing everything that it can after that success.
Yeah.
And we had the issues with the Magic Weekend where it wasn't as well attended as it should, and everyone says, "Oh, is it carrying on? Who knows?" Blah blah blah. And then the IMG, and we could talk about that sort of stuff from now on. But Matty mentioned it in the last episode when we introduced the fact that we were going to interview you, that it was the Magic Weekend for the wheelchair team, and I went, "All right, I thought it had already been." You've told me there's 4 Magic Weekends, but I don't think I've seen many, if at all, any advertisement for the game. So first of all, as an outsider, I would love to see the game being more advertised. It's got to keep developing, and I'd love to see, as someone involved, to hear your opinion on where this game can go and how you think it's got to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said it. The sport of wheelchair rugby league could become massive. There's a genuine chance that it could become professional in not the near future by any means, but certainly in the future.
As I said to you, I could see it becoming especially a Paralympic sport or an Olympic sport, or getting some form of recognition on that stage, because we had a World Cup. There could have only been 20 games in total, if that. Because there was, how many groups was there? Was there
2 groups of 4.
Two groups of 4, 3, 6. Yeah, not even 15 games, but the excitement around it was massive. I think that could really spread around the world, and not even just for the wheelchair game, the success that it could bring to the running game of getting countries involved. I really do think that could be targeted, and getting guys like yourself, getting the guys from Leeds who were involved in the World Cup squad, actually household names in the rugby league world first of all, but around the world on the biggest stage, is a real possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said it, I always will say it, genuinely could be one of the biggest sports in the world, and I think, like you said, off the back of the World Cup, there was a big push, and we've definitely seen that. We've had a lot more players playing, not just at Wigan, but everywhere. Yeah. We've had new clubs popping up.
Yeah,
we've had new nations potentially interested, and nations pushing up and moving through. And obviously, there's always new nations. After every World Cup, you hear the rumours, oh, well, these are going to be in next time, these are going to be in next time. But we're genuinely hoping we'll be able to help and develop and keep growing.
Yeah.
And like you said, it all comes off the back of advertisement and getting it out there. And it's not necessarily a case of just trying to shove it on everyone and say, come down and watch. But like you said, just advertisement, getting it out there, getting it known. Doing a lot more work through Super League clubs, getting linked with more Super League clubs or Championship clubs, and being able to do it that way. I think there's genuinely a real opportunity for the game to be massive.
That is brilliant to hear, that it has the potential to become not only a very dominant sport in this country, but a dominant sport around the world. And I think we should be doing absolutely everything we can to push this game. So we talk about Super League. There are in the running game there are 12 Super League teams. In the Championship there is another 12 or 13 again in League One. For me as an outsider, I would love a world where we've got a 3-tier wheelchair game and promotion and relegation and a playoffs and imagine a world where we could potentially have a wheelchair grand final running alongside and the season runs alongside Super League. That for me, I don't know your opinion on that, but would be the goal to have.
Yeah, we're certainly working towards that. In terms of obviously the season and the grand finals, we're working towards that. That is exactly where we want to be. I think in terms of linking with the Super League clubs, obviously with IMG's new rulings that have just come out about having disability sports and community foundations, I think there's a real chance and a genuine market for us to be able to get stuck in. We've already got Hull, Wigan, Leeds, Warrington, Super League, just in the Championship and the Super League off the top of my head in the wheelchair Super League. And then you've got Halifax as well, who are linked with a Championship club.
London. What's their name?
London Roosters.
London Roosters, sorry.
So
are they closely linked with the Broncos?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
I hope so.
There's obviously a chance there. North Wales Crusaders, North Wales Crusaders running team. So there's a real chance and a real market, and I think that's a good way for us to be able to, as we mentioned, advertise the game further and get it going that way. And I think, as we've said, the more players we're getting, the more players we're developing. That, going back to the World Cup, improves the nation as well, because you get a much bigger pool of players and you're going to get more talent and everyone's driving each other to be better. And I think we're on the right lines, to be honest with you. I think we're on the right tracks.
For me, I've always been involved in like junior sports of other sports, and the way to improve the game is to get juniors playing, get more players. I think the name of it is the fundamentals, they call it.
The sort of the grassroots
level. The grassroots level. More people you have involved in that, more become competitive, more get to the competitive level, then more compete for the 10 international spots for each nation. That drives it, more competitiveness, and eventually I think the game could become self-sustaining, and that's the hope.
Yeah, that's exactly the hope, yeah. And like you said, it just comes back to that sort of development level of enjoying it, having fun, it's a hobby, and then see where it takes you.
That's absolutely brilliant. Now, obviously, the Wigan side, what I'm seeing on the Twitter, there's becoming more and more from Wigan. It's you mentioned off her how well the Wigan club is helping the wheelchair game.
Yeah.
And the backing of you guys, obviously the facilitating training and helping you guys with that. How helpful have they been?
They've been brilliant. Obviously, there's always going to be a couple of teething problems. We're a new team coming in, but we got those sorted pretty quickly actually, and they've been amazing with us. We couldn't be asking for a lot more, to be honest with you. Everything we're asking for, anything we might need, we're being offered. They're being really good with us actually, and I know it's very similar at Leeds with their sort of foundation and seeing what we're being able to sort of look at. And being, like I said, just being offered. It's not even a thing of
having to go and ask.
Yeah, having to go and ask. Could we please have this? Is there any chance we could get that? It's sort of, might you need this?
Yeah.
Will you potentially need this? And it's
so them guys being proactive.
Yeah, and it's the effort of them getting to know the sport and know the players and working sort of from there, from the community foundation side. It's actually been really good to see, and it's been really good to feel a part of the club.
Yeah.
Like, I don't just feel like I'm playing for Wigan Warriors wheelchair team. I feel like I'm playing at Wigan Warriors because we're so involved as much as possible, and it's actually been brilliant.
There's a couple of funny things that I picked up on that I really liked. So, for example, Wigan, when they're tweeting about the team, it's the Wigan Warriors in the wheelchair league. It's you are a part of the Wigan Warriors team, and I think what the club is doing, getting everyone together behind the Wigan club, it's really, really good. And it's good to hear that from someone inside the club, that they're backing you and they're trying to help you be as successful as possible.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way on the inside as well as much as it looks on the outside. Like last year, you might have seen the big article about everybody down at Robin Park doing a massive club training session, and just little things like that are, to some of our players, that'll mean the world because they've been Wigan fans forever. Like I'm stood there playing a game of touch rugby with people from the girls, the women's, the juniors, the academy, the youth, the touch, the men's, and it's just incredible to see everyone like that. You've got us, PD and LD, being able to be involved in that.
Yeah.
And sort of the disability side being so heavily involved with everyone else. And in the foundation and in the club in general, it's genuinely brilliant.
And again, that can only help you guys to develop.
Yeah, massively.
Actually, looking at the touch team, for example, there must be some areas of the game where you can learn something from them, because I know they are different games, but they are still very, very closely related to rugby league, and the nuances and the skill.
Yeah, and the sort of speed as well. Yeah. The games match each other a lot more similarly. And we, as we mentioned before when we were chatting off air, sort of the places we can get inspiration from. It's not necessarily a new sport, but certainly newer.
Yeah.
So we're getting drills from rugby league, from touch, sometimes from rugby union maybe, but we're also looking at all wheelchair sports as well, so we can get drills from wheelchair basketball, from the Paralympic wheelchair rugby or murder ball, depending on what you know it as and how old you are. We're looking at different things like that and ways of improving rugby skills, improving chair skills, and being able to sort of take inspiration from everything gives us quite a big playing area actually of what we can sort of achieve and what we can look at. So
yeah, because you've got a lot of more established sports. So I know the wheelchair basketball is probably 10, 15 years ahead of where you guys are with how long it's been played for, and
I'd say even further,
really even further than that. But using that as inspiration to, this is how they practice their chair skills, or they practice this attacking drill or movement, things that you might not have covered before. You're learning from them, learning from touch, learning from all these different areas, and bringing it into one sport. It's really, one, it must be difficult, but so rewarding and so advantageous for you guys.
No, definitely, and it's not necessarily just about drills either. Like you can look at the way rugby league is run for inspiration because we have rugby league.
Yeah.
But then you can look at wheelchair basketball because it's a wheelchair sport and they're all so similar. So you can get inspiration from all sorts of areas for every aspect of the game, and I think that's one of the big benefits of being a bit newer. And that's one of the things we like, with being able to experiment and try new things and how we do things. And yeah, it's actually really good for us. We enjoy it a lot.
That's absolutely brilliant to hear. Right, we're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we've got some listeners who've sent in a few questions who want a bit of an insight into the wheelchair game. So that should be interesting to read.
Sounds good.
Thank you, and we'll be back after a break. So Declan, we're back for our final section of the interview. We've got a few questions from a couple of listeners about wheelchair rugby league and about yourself and the World Cup and everything that went on.
Yeah.
So we're going to start. First of all, I've got to say, Alex, of course we were always going to ask him about how he started playing wheelchair rugby league. What a silly question that is. But your wife, Becca, has come back with a far better question. One that Deck has said, it's probably the first time that he's been asked about it.
Yeah.
Becca said, what does training for wheelchair rugby league look like? Declan, can you give us an insight?
So I think it's pretty unique actually, because it's very, very similar to training for any other sport in that it's quite structured. But obviously the things we do are very different to anything else. Yeah. So we'll start off with a warm-up, which might be sort of chair defence mirroring drill, or potentially some sort of fun game, or some sort of attacking drill maybe.
So in that chair mirroring, defensive chair mirroring, that's like one-on-one Is it almost one-on-one, watching what the opponent does and matching their movements?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's just making sure in a small area,
Yeah.
but probably slightly bigger than you defend in a game, you can get a couple of blocks on. So they'll push at you and try and get past you, and you've got to turn, use your chair to stop them. So there's no tags involved, we're not doing tackles, we're just using chairs.
Ah, right, okay.
Just sort of keep people going, because obviously the best way to get a tag is to get your chair positioning correct and stop them.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a focus that we'll go for, or we might knock that then to 2v2, and it's also about communication as well as that, or we'll just start off going through some really easy line passing, then 2v1s, 3v2s.
Yeah.
The warm-up's generally a bit of pushing, but a bit of ball handling, or some sort of technical work, as well as getting yourselves moving and getting everything going. Then we'll move into a couple of drills, whatever we want to focus on. Again, very similar to anything else, but I think the biggest limitation that we have is depending on how many we've got.
Yeah.
So normally, let's say you're at a running game training session and you've got 20.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot for a lot of teams. So you'll end up having a game of 10 aside.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very realistic for us at training to have 15. So we can't then do 2 shortened sides. We actually have to do 3 sides and rotate everyone on when we do a game at the end to put everything into practice.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a bit of a different challenge in that, because, like I said, it's very, very rare at a running game training at an amateur level. You'll have 2 teams of 13 for the game at the end. You normally do like a left v right, or somewhat shorter sided. Whereas, like I said, we will quite often have 3 teams of 5, if not more, sort of rotating on and round robin,
rotating on and off
to work on everything we've done through the session, which I think is probably the biggest difference and the biggest thing it takes people to adapt to.
Yeah. Well, that's quite interesting to hear, because obviously it is still rugby league.
Yeah.
So there are the similarities behind the technical aspects of it, but then how you've adapted that to wheelchair to the wheelchair game. And I suppose you admitted yourself earlier on that as a coach you're still learning.
Yeah.
The coaches, you talked about how your dad's coached for far longer than you've been coaching, and he's still learning the game and still learning different tricks. And forever and ever, you should improve and should practice and aim to improve. But it's good to hear that you're taking a lot of inspiration on that. Now, this one comes from one of your teammates, Reese. He's asked, can you put him over for a try so we can celebrate like Alex Towell?
Well, hopefully he listens to this so I can remind him. The last time somebody tried to put him in for a try, he pushed in touch. So
Reese.
I'll bring that one back up for Reese, and I will try my best, but I can't promise anything.
He's got to finish it. If you put him through, he's got to finish it.
He's got to be able to finish it. So
Reese, that one's back on you there. You've got to finish his chances. Now, obviously in the World Cup final there was a talking point, shall we say?
Saw this one coming.
Yeah. So you actually introduced me to actually understanding how the officiating works in the game, because I assumed that the referees on both sides were dual referees, sort of like in the old NRL style where there was 2 referees.
Yeah.
You actually corrected me that one is the main official and one is there to support him, so there is like a pecking order as such.
No, exactly, because at a normal league game you wouldn't have the 2 in-goal judges. It'd just be the 2 referees. Yeah. So it's not necessarily like it's a touch judge. Obviously they stand on the side so they don't get run over. It's literally the reason they don't stand in the middle.
But obviously the pitch is a lot smaller, so there's less room for them to get out the way.
No, exactly. So it's more of, there'll be a number 1 referee who will be quote unquote the main referee, and they'll in the old NRL style there'd be an attacking referee, and that's generally what they focus on more, the open play, the ball, foul play, forward passes, anything like that. The second referee is sort of a defensive referee, so that they'll do a lot more of the 4 metres, making sure kick chasers are on side, watching anything in the back play in case there's anything there, and they'll be the one who goes behind and puts the flag up when there's a conversion. So it tends to work a little bit more like that. In answer to what actually happened with that particular event, I'm not going to dwell in it too much.
Yeah. Well, you told me that he was the second referee on the day.
Yeah.
So do you know who? Obviously, I take it's the same as every other sport. he is your match official and this is the supporting ref.
Yeah, so my understanding of the situation was he disagreed with the decision.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not going to go into it too far. It's
Yeah.
been dealt with independently by the IRL. And at the end of the day, that's just a little bit cliched, but control the controllables when you're in the heat of the World Cup final. There's nothing you can do about that. You just got to keep your heads on, keep pushing and playing your game plan.
That was more what I wanted to ask you about. You're playing that game. You're involved. You were on the bench at the time. You can see what's unfolding. It's very hard to ignore it. It must have been very hard to sit there and go, all right, we can't control that. Let's ignore it. But the commentators were going, what's going on? Twitter exploded. There must have been a little bit of nerves of, oh my God, what's going on? But then to bring yourself back down to the moment and live in that moment of, we've still got a job to do. How long do you think you thought about that incident for in the time? Or was it something that you only really reflected on after the game?
It was something that was generally only reflected on after the game. Obviously, in the heat of the moment, we saw it and we reacted as humans would in that sort of high-pressure environment. But I think very quickly we managed to, certainly us on the bench, and in terms of the way we were shouting onto the team and encouraging, and the coaching staff as well, I believe, everybody sort of managed to get back down pretty quick and focus back up. Yeah. And I think, to be honest, that was actually a big factor towards the end of the game. Yeah. In the fact that we managed to regain our composure and push on from there.
Do you think you gained your composure a little bit quicker than your opponents in that situation? Because he was a French referee, you were playing France. As much as that must have affected you guys, it's also got to have played an effect on the French lads that were involved, because they're involved in the game, they're seeing it going on and they don't know what the decision is, and then they're going to be affected, and it's almost a battle of who can compose yourself the fastest, who can get back into the game and ignore the uncontrollables, as you say.
No, exactly, and I'm not necessarily sure the fact that they're French and he's French has anything to do with it, other than the fact they're familiar with him. I don't think there'll have been any bias going on. Yeah. Or anything like that, but I just think in the heat of the moment, everybody's human, and sometimes people react poorly. 99 times out of 100, it'll be a player. Yeah. And referees are human too at the end of the day. And
they're allowed to make mistakes. And
it happens, and it's always going to happen. That's part of the game, and that's part of being a human. So you just amazing. Get on with it and do what you can.
That's it. It is amazing how often, when it's a ref that makes a mistake, everyone picks up on it. But they are humans. They can make mistakes, and you made a mistake in a decision. Can't do anything about it. Game carried on, and in my opinion, looking at the game, sat on my couch watching it on the TV, I think you guys, not massively, but you reacted slightly better than the French team did, and that obviously gives you a little bit of an advantage to carry on in the game. So now we're going to have a look at another question, okay, from ancientandloyal.com. Is there any chance that wheelchair rugby is starting to be distorted by able-bodied athletes, and would a classification system be worthwhile? Now, you've already explained to me that there are on your team of 5, you have to have a minimum of 3 disabled players, and a maximum of 2 able-bodied players.
Yeah, so almost a very rudimentary classification system in itself. This question is I'd say a debated one at the moment around the game. Everybody has their own opinion. I'm not here to throw mine out there upon anybody who might be listening. Everybody can form their own opinions, and I think that's one of the benefits of being rugby league. Everybody always has their own opinion. I think,
and everyone's always right as well.
Oh, of course, everybody with every opinion is correct. Yeah. I think for the sustainability of the game long term, it could potentially be beneficial. But again, there's also negatives to that in terms of the implications of, does it make the sport less inclusive? Yeah. Or does it make the sport more inclusive, depending on how you look at inclusivity? But again, very opinion based. If you were looking at sort of a basketball style, classic wheelchair basketball style system, it'd be expensive, it'd be long winded, and would it necessarily work for our game? Because obviously, as much as they are similar, they're two very different games. And I know that's an opinion some people would have is, would that work?
And again, with the basketball, it is far more established.
Again,
and
yeah, exactly.
They put the money in getting it, getting it set up and getting this classification system. As an outsider, I don't think the game is ready for such an in-depth review of each player's disability or ableness to play the game.
Yeah.
But in an ideal world, 10 years, 15 years time, there may be some form of system. I like if you look at the PDRL, they have a certain amount of players that fall under different categories of disabilities, and you have to have so many on at a certain amount of at certain points in the game. So I think the rules is you can have two able-bodied players, but again they can't.
It's very different for them to.
Yeah, and that classification has been worked out because there is more players on the field. You guys are limited to the fact that there's only 5 players on the field.
No, exactly. So it's like I said at the start. I'm not here to put my opinion on anyone.
Yeah,
my opinion is my own.
Yeah,
people will know it. Some people will not. That's for me to decide whether to tell them or not.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that there are definitely benefits and negatives to having a classification system.
Yeah.
You could go as in-depth or as minimal as you like. So, for example, the one we've got now is about as minimalistic as it can get without removing
any barriers
altogether. Whether that's an idea, that's for other people to decide.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest with you, it's something that might be worth looking into.
Yeah.
In terms of the sustainability of bringing in disabled players to the sport.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's something that needs to be done now. I don't know if that's something that will be looked into the future.
Because
obviously how in depth you go with that as well. That's
obviously you guys you've had such a success in bringing players in. You don't want to potentially push people away with something like that. So there's a balance, and that's above our heads. It's above your head. It's the powers that be that will make that decision.
That's as I said, it's my opinion is my opinion. That's nothing for me to put on anybody else. That's to be decided far above my head at the highest level of the game for the people who have been running the game for a long time now. And I think, like I said, everybody has their opinion. Everybody can say what they want, but at the end of the day, the game is still in a place where we can grow it.
Yeah.
And if people want to look into that, they could. If they didn't want to look into that, they wouldn't have to. But I think that the biggest sort of barrier to it is the fact that it'd be a long process.
Yeah.
It'd be a costly process.
Yeah.
And as we said, it's a very unknown territory, as we've always had the very rudimentary classification system we've got now of 3 non-disabled players, 3 disabled players, 2 non-disabled players at most. So, I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is that people are still playing the game and we're still developing the sport the way we are. And
more people are playing than ever before.
No, exactly. And just keep getting people involved and getting people down, because obviously the game is a wheelchair-based sport. We need disabled players to play.
Yeah.
But obviously, without the mix of non-disabled players, you'd have so many less stories of players who've come down to play with the family, players who've come down to play with the friends, which you see all over the game.
Yeah.
Any club you look at, you'll find that sort of story.
And that's brilliant to hear, them stories of someone playing with the friend who's got a disability.
Or had an injury and can't play running the game anymore. I think that's the inclusivity is the big selling point.
Yeah.
It's just whether you look, will that make it more inclusive or less inclusive? And
it's all about balance.
Everybody has their opinion, and it's entirely up to what people think on their own. I think the most important thing is to keep developing the sport, keep growing the game, and see where we end up from there. And that's exactly what I'm going to continue to focus on down at Wigan.
That's exactly what you should be doing. You're doing a brilliant job. Now, the last responder was from another podcast, 6 again. They've got in touch and they've got you 2 questions. So, first of all, how different is life on the court since the World Cup?
it's not as different as you'd think. The game is still played to a very high standard as
Yeah.
it was last year. I don't think all that much has changed in the way the game is played. There's a couple of little differences that you'll notice if you know the game, but nothing you'd massively notice as an outsider. I don't think it's changed a great deal. And yeah, I think it's still fast, it's still skillful. I think it's still very wheelchair rugby league.
Brilliant. Now, the second part of this question, obviously, it's been quite well reported that you played against your dad in the World Cup, but this year he's left Wigan, he's gone elsewhere. How's that been for you? This first real period of your career, not being involved with your dad, being on the same side as him, from the World Cup onwards, that's a real shock to the system. How have you found that?
Yeah, it's definitely been different. I think he obviously went a couple of weeks ago, probably about a month ago, pretty much. It wasn't exactly a shock.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
So it was something I had a bit of time to prepare for, but I'm not sure anything would have prepared me for the plunge off the deep end because, as you said, he's been involved with me in rugby league since I started, which is 20 years ago. So it's something I was kind of ready for, but I was never going to be fully ready for. And I think it's just about sort of finding my own way about how to interact with the players from a more coaching perspective. I wouldn't say I am the coach, but from a more as a senior player, it's something that I'm trying to get involved in, and I think
because you have took a big role on with Wigan and taking on some coaching responsibilities and being a senior player and a World Cup player, you've represented England. You're a big name in the sport. You've now got a different sort of role to nurture the next set of players and develop the game, and you're doing that and finding it by yourself. That's a new experience for you, and one that I think you started very well. It's very early on into that career, but it's going to be a challenge, and I suppose you're always going to have your dad there for that advice and to help you develop. But it must be different. It must be weird not seeing him there.
Yeah, it's kind of weird in a way because we've kind of gone the opposite ways. Obviously, I announced my international retirement earlier this year, so I've sort of taken that step back from the international scene, which has kind of made this a little bit easier for me because I've got a bit more time. Yeah. Whereas he's taken the step back from Wigan to take on a bigger role at Ireland and be able to sort of...
Because he's now... Is he player coach or is he just coach? Sorry.
He's player coach at the moment, but he's obviously working on growing the game for Irish players in England, but also in Ireland as well, which is obviously helping the sustainability over there and of the game in general. So it's kind of weird how we've gone the opposite ways with that, but yeah, like you said, I've still got him to speak to for advice. Obviously, he's not just abandoned me. Yeah, he's not just gone figure it out for yourself. Bye. He's not just abandoned us. He's still there if we need any advice. We can still give him a shout and ask him anything. But like I said, it's kind of time for us to figure our own way of doing things. And myself and the coach Chris and the other senior players like Jack and Adam to sort of find where we fit into that and see what we can do with it and see how we are able to sort of pass that seniority and the wisdom and the knowledge down to the newer players, which isn't necessarily something we weren't doing anyway. Yeah. But it's something that has become a bigger role. Yeah. So I'm really enjoying and looking forward to the rest of the challenge and getting stuck in with the newer players and even the more experienced players to a degree and seeing what I can help pass on.
Because that's the thing with every great coaching career. You look at Man United with Ferguson, Wigan with Sean Wayne. There's a time when they move on and everyone's got to change and everyone's got to adapt, and you're very early on in that process, and you guys are doing really, really well with the wheelchair team, but there's still so much more for you guys to do, and you can only take it to the next level. In my opinion, you can only carry on improving.
That's certainly the plan, so fingers crossed we'll keep moving on from here.
So that wraps it up, Declan. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been really insightful to see yourself, not only from your experience at the World Cup, but on the court. Yeah. We wish you guys and the Wigan Warriors wheelchair team all the best success, and we hope that you guys continue to keep going. We'll take a massive push and try and help you guys promote the wheelchair game, because it's something that I've loved watching. I've loved hearing about. I know I've not been able to get down to as many games as I'd like to, but I want this game to be as successful as the running game is.
Well, that's certainly the hope, and obviously we'll hopefully see you down at a couple more throughout the rest of the season. I'll give you a shout with some home fixtures, but
Definitely.
we'll get it out there, keep growing the game, and see where we end up, because the point, as I mentioned, is for everybody to enjoy it and see where we can go from there, because that's the basis of every good sport, I think.
Yeah. So, thank you for listening, guys. Declan, it's been a pleasure. If you get any free time, go and watch Wigan Warriors wheelchair team. We'll catch you next week. Thank you.
Cheers.
He'll put you in his trap, 'cause he's a union man. He's got it all figured out. You won't get what you think, 'cause he's an